So our topic today is the RIC Forum that we'll be conducting in March of 2024, and we will separate this webinar into two sections. I'll be talking first from the programmatic side, then we'll pause for questions, and then Lauriston is going to cover some technical issues, and we'll again pause for questions at the end. So write your questions into the chat, and Kristen is going to organize those questions and ask them to us. So you can ask questions at any time in the chat and we'll address them. If we don't feel we can address your questions during the webinar, then we will post those answers afterwards. I see we have more people coming in, so I'm going to pause briefly to let those few extra people connect. So our vision with the RIC Forum is an authentic XApp and RApp demonstrations that showcase the current state of the Open RAN, RIC, XApp, and RApps. So we'd really like to delve into not just the theory, but some live demonstrations that show where industry is, what is being done, what can be done. RIC Forum will be a technical knowledge sharing event. There's going to be no validation on our part, no prizes. This is for demonstrations and knowledge sharing. It will be conducted by our department, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration's Institute for Telecommunication Science. We are part of the U.S. Department of Commerce and the U.S. Department of Defense's Future G and 5G offices. We will be selecting 10 suppliers of RIC XApps and RApps to come to the event and showcase what they're doing. We need people to apply by the 23rd of October this year by 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Those submissions will be submitted by email. The event logistics. The event will be March 27 and 28 in 2024 in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas in the United States, somewhere in the metro area. This event will be open to industry and academia worldwide. So there's no limitations on who can apply and attend and be involved. Our focus is both on the near real-time RIC and XApps and on the non-real-time RApps. Either or both can be submitted. Our use cases of interest, we are particularly interested in energy saving and traffic steering. That said, if you have another use case that you're developing, and you think this is very important, feel free to submit those as a wild card. We just ask if you're focusing on something other than energy saving or traffic steering, that you make a compelling argument for this use case. We are looking for demonstrations that show the ability of RIC, XApps, and RApps to support both commercial and DoD applications. And I'm sorry to everyone who joined on time, but we had enough people come in the last 3 minutes that I'm going to go back to the first slide and go over that information a second time. So to repeat for people who are still joining us, our vision is authentic XApp and RApp demonstrations to showcase the current state of Open RAN, RIC, XApps, and RApps. This will be a technical knowledge sharing event with no validation of XApps or RApps, no prizes. This is strictly for focusing on live demonstrations actual demonstrations of XApps and RApps. This event is sponsored by our department, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration's Institute for Telecommunication Sciences, and the U.S. Department of Defense's Future G and 5G offices. We will be selecting 10 suppliers of RIC, XApp, and RApps to come in and demonstrate what they're doing and what they have done. We need people to apply by October 23rd this year by 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The event will be March 27 to 28 in 2024, held in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas in the United States, somewhere in the metro area. And this event is open to industry and academia worldwide. There are no limitations on country of origin. Our focus is on both the near real-time RIC and XApps and the non-real-time RIC and RApps. And we're also open to a combination and a demonstration that uses both an XApp and an RApp. The use cases we are most interested in are energy saving and traffic steering. However, if you are working on a topic, a different use case that you think is very compelling, feel free to submit a wildcard application, and we just ask that you make a very compelling case for why you believe that's an important use case that we should demonstrate. We are asking for apps that demonstrate the ability of a RIC XApp and or RApp to support both commercial and DoD applications. Each of the participants will be starting with a 30-minute presentation. So think of your standard conference room, a large venue with a stage and a screen. These demonstrations will include a live link to a remote location. We're not expecting that the full system will be on site. Rather, we will ask for an on-site presenter who is interfacing with and demonstrating through a video link that shows a remote location where your system is deployed. We need these to not be simulations, not video recordings. We want actual demonstrations of live systems that are showing network impacts, changing network impacts, and how the RIC XApp or RApp is responding and changing the network's performance as user demand changes. So we understand there will be pauses to make this possible, and that's the expected behavior during this event. The focus, again, we want people to be able to see these dynamic network changes triggered by the app. After the demonstrations in a separate room, we will have a RIC showcase. That is, it's a separate room where each one of the participants will have an area and they can focus one-on-one talking to the people who are at the event to have more in-depth technical discussions. That setup of this part of the event will be on March 26th for all participants, and we'll be providing 2 tables with 2 chairs, 1 or 2 monitors, depending on what is requested by the participants, 750 watts power, and 100 megabits per second internet bandwidth per participant. These showcases can be any combination of fully relying on remote streaming, fully bringing in equipment that's deployed at the event, or some combination of the two. During the showcase, it's acceptable to have recorded demonstrations so that you can fast forward to different events and show a larger array of behaviors. We understand that changing the network performance causes some delays that might hinder these one-on-one conversations. So any sort of a showcase that you think is appropriate, we're interested. We just ask that on your application that you describe what you have in mind for this showcase. So again, the showcase will be after the half-hour presentation. You can expect that the attendees will understand what you're doing, and the showcase will last approximately 2.5 hours. We will have 5 participants showcasing at the same time, and this will give you adequate time to really delve into details with each of the participants. Each of the days will have a very similar schedule. This is the first day, Wednesday, March 27th, 2024. Check-in from 8 to 8:30. After a welcome speech, we will have a keynote, and the person doing that keynote will be announced later. Then we will have 5 half-hour presentations before lunch, and after lunch, 2 panel sessions. One, a panel session focusing on the laboratories, and the second, a panel session of a more technical nature. And again, the details on these panels will be released later. Then towards the end of the day, we will have the RIC showcase, where the 5 presenters who presented in the morning will talk in more detail one-on-one with participants, and then networking time in the evening. So again, that starts at 8:30. On the second day, day 2, Thursday, March 28th, we will start half an hour earlier at 8 o'clock, and that's to bring forward our end time to 4 o'clock and let people who want to leave on a late afternoon or evening flight, let them be able to leave on those flights. So again, we'll start with a keynote, followed by the 5 presenters, 6 through 10, who are going on day 2. And after lunch, we will have a longer panel session with stakeholders, followed by the RIC showcase for the second group of presenters, numbers 6 through 10, and ending with networking time. So I'd like to pause now for questions that people have submitted through the chat. And Kristen?
Yes, hello. We do have one question from the chat. Who will be the audience for the showcase?
So the audience will be both the Department of Defense and the Department of Commerce. We will be inviting other people to attend. Part of the audience will be other participants and interested stakeholders.
Thank you. And that's all we have for now in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Lauriston.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm pleased to see we have so many people attending and so many friends of ours in the industry. Thanks for being here during this early or late time, or maybe it's right in the middle of the day for some. So I'm going to go over some high-level technical information. Let me start off by saying that as Margaret said in her very first slide, we're looking for authentic, and that means operating. That means being able to demonstrate that the RIC in combination with XApp or app or both is actually having an impact on the network in the ways that we're going to discuss in a minute. So just to be at a very high level, everyone knows the near real-time RIC, it supports control loops from 10 milliseconds up to a second. Enables near real-time control and optimization of the network and supports XApps in the process, or is supported by XApps, however you want to look at that. Then we have the non-real-time RIC, and it supports control loops of greater than a second, generally looking to perform RAM optimization and other such functions as that, and is supported by RApps, and of course is a component of the SMO, Service Management Orchestration. Let me touch right here on this point that we are not requiring, we're not requiring that these XApps and RApps and RICs all come from the same vendor. They can come from separate vendors. And what we're really interested in is seeing this thing impact the network in the way that you describe in your application. That's what we're trying to help assess and bring our partners into the process of seeing, here's how the RIC is actually, and its associated apps are affecting the network. Margaret, do you have control or do I have control of these slides?
I have control.
Okay, if you'll go to the next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk for a minute about the use case. We've targeted 2 use cases for this one, and these are ones that are very familiar to people in the industry and have been targeted also by ORAN Alliance. These are energy savings and traffic steering. So we'll go into more detail about both of those, and we'll talk about the idea that we want to see what we would call dual use, both commercial applications as well as potential Department of Defense applications. The third category that Margaret mentioned was the wild card, and this is we wanted to give you the opportunity to be inventive. So in this case, if you have another use case that you're supporting, whatever that might be, we're interested to know, we're interested to understand what it is, why it's important to both commercial and DoD applications, and we really want to understand why this one's really interesting and what it brings to the party. So please give us that level of detail in your application if you're going to come in with supporting a different use case. And we're certainly going to entertain that. We think it's an interesting opportunity and might spice things up just a bit. All right, Margaret, next slide, please. So let's talk about these applications or these use cases in more detail. First, we're going to talk about it from what the audience is probably most used to, and that's the commercial applications of this. So if we first look at energy savings, it's the ability via the RIC and the 2 interfaces, all the interfaces, to lower the energy consumption of the network. That's a big deal for everybody. OpEx for carriers is huge, and so if we can lower that energy consumption, that's much better. So we want to see it change the operation. In this case, we're really looking for it to change the operation of the RU. Certainly there are some use cases that can affect other parts of the network. This is what we're really looking for. But if you have a use case of energy savings that's different in that regard, please let us know. And certainly, the energy savings needs to operate by some mechanism where it's pulling information from the network and then operating on the network. Now, the ORAN Alliance has identified 3 sub-use cases. That's carrier and cell switch on and off, or channel switch on and off, and advanced sleep modes. Certainly those are available to you, and we'd be interested in that. If you have another sub-use case, that's fine. Please just explain it. Again, we're just trying to lower the cost of operating the network from a energy savings, energy efficiency side. Then we go to traffic steering. Once again, via the RIC, move traffic between spectral bands, address imbalances in the network, or in the case people can look at it as increasing your spectral capacity in the process or efficiency. You can also use this to increase your peak or average throughput, and that may be for specific users or classes of users. So that's at a very high level what traffic steering is. Generally, it's a policy-based approach and uses XApps, RApps, and both. The idea here is to enhance the productivity of network resources. And this, however you want to look at those resources, however you want to talk about traffic steering. So if you have a use case that has a specific class of user that you want to have a minimum throughput, by example, that maybe then you're going to use traffic steering to make sure that class of user has that level of capacity that you might have defined in SLA. That's one thing you can do with traffic steering. Again, it'd be really nice to look at this. I have a tendency to look more towards near real time, but we're looking at both real time, non-real time, and near real time. Next slide, please. Now, the interesting part of this challenge is, as you know, we are sponsored in part by the Department of Defense, Office of the Undersecretary of Research and Engineering. And so what we're looking for in this is not just to demonstrate that you've got a great energy savings XApp or RIC associated activity use case. But now let's see if, and we're not asking you to rewrite stuff from scratch, but we're interested to see if you can actually apply this to some specific cases for Department of Defense use. And here we're really looking at a few areas. One of the biggest would be power and use management. And here we're trying to extend the operation of, for all intents and purposes, man-packed GNOBs. So can I figure out a way to optimize the performance of this GNOB as my power resources is declining? And can I demonstrate optimization of certain activities because of that? It's these could be remote deployed, these could be man-packable, however you want to look at that. So always with DoD requirements, if you can lower the swap, you're winning in the process. So are you doing something by the very nature of your energy savings application that says I now don't have to have as much power available, so that in the example of a portable or man-packable GNOB, now I don't have as big of batteries. So that's something that's very interesting to know. And once again, talk about operation of a low latency, low capacity GNOB operations. We're not, in that case, maybe you're looking at lower throughputs, that sort of thing. And in the end, if you want to look at a different way, optimizing for different mixes of user endpoints in the process. And here, you can talk about different traffic patterns, different data patterns, that sort of thing. So these are the ideas that you take a standard commercial, and standard's a great word, but you take a energy savings use case and say, now, how can I use this to also look towards energy efficiency with the concept of maybe a declining availability of energy on your source for a period of time. This is one way you can look at a dual use case in energy savings. Others would certainly be something you can think about. These are the ones that our partner has brought to us. Moving on to the next slide, please. Traffic saving, traffic steering. Again, we've talked about the idea of traffic steering as optimization of network resources. Now, there's also other things you can do with traffic savings that may be of quite value to DoD and possibly other operations as well. Detection and response to interference. Okay, so I've got interference in my network. Can I detect it? Can I then use traffic steering to move that traffic that would experience interference into a band or into a methodology by which they're not experiencing interference? So spectrum steering is one of those specific areas where you can think about demonstration of that, which is well within the band of what we would think for a commercial operation of traffic steering. Directionality control. So, and again, this is an addressing to interference. In DoD parlance, that might be jamming. But in this case, we're just saying, how do I avoid that? Or how do I avoid unintended reception? So this is a very interesting way of steering the traffic, not just by band, but also by radiation from your antennas. The ability to move traffic, and that can be in many sorts. That can even be the concept of breaking traffic up into various paths and recombining it, if you can do that with a traffic steering algorithm. And finally, the idea of optimization of QoS for specific users, for a QoS for different devices in the process, and can that be changed over time as things evolve, and you need to now change which users have what level of QoS. Interesting thing to demonstrate. These are just concepts from our side and from our partner side. If you have another one that takes a commercial use case of energy savings or traffic steering and applies it to an idea that's useful for Department of Defense, that's something we would certainly be interested in. Please explain it in as much detail as you're comfortable in your application. Next slide, please. So we'll get to the application part here. This is very simple. The application form is on the website listed here. And we want to know your use case. We want to know XApp, RApp, or both. We'd like to know the technical specifications, the network specifications, and how you plan to trigger this dynamic changes to the network. We want to understand fundamentally, how does this work? Why is it bringing me something new to this process? Obviously, ORAN in the process is creating the programmable RAN. So show me how, help us understand how what you're doing exercises that capability, programmability, and change either in near real time or non-real time in the process. As Margaret mentioned earlier, there's no restrictions on country or place of origin. The only thing is individuals or entities on the Export Administration Regulation Entity List are not allowed, and you can see that in supplement number 4 to part 744 of the EAR. I got through that well. So please submit to any questions or any issues to the RIC form at nta.gov. How are we going to select this? Well, we're going to have a technical team evaluate the applications. The criteria we'll be using is to choose will be the application rating. How well do we think it fits with the goals of the forum and the technology applicable to what the application is the use case. We're going to be looking for diversity of solutions. So that doesn't mean that we won't accept multiple applications that show similar things, but if we can get a diversity, the more the better in the process. Here's one area that will be interesting for you to help us understand is obviously if we are working in an AI/ML environment, which you may be, then you have to be trained, and then the application has to run against measured data of some sort. So we'd love to understand more about what is your network and traffic data look like? Where does it come from? I mean, is it completely simulated? Is it anonymized from a carrier? Just let us understand more about that, because we're interested in understanding how this would apply to a general carrier environment in this case, because that's going to run commercially first, or if this is focused on enterprise, which is fine, then help us understand where the traffic that you're using for training comes from, where's the traffic that you're going to use during your demonstration come from, how does it manifest itself? And obviously, since we're talking about a RIC, ECA, and RApps, we really want to understand that you're adhering to Open RAN technology goals in the process. Just help us understand that. We'll announce the presenters on November 13th, and there will be a waiting list of people that did not get on there. And if someone is unable to continue, then we will ask somebody from the waiting list to join the process. And I believe that's all the slides I have. I think we're going to questions now. So this should be interesting. And I will say up front, if they're deeply technical questions, we may leave them to reply on the website, but we'll try to address as many as we can now. Thank you. So back to you, Kristen.
Thank you, Lauriston. So we have a few more programmatic questions. Can you please restate the application due date?
So the applications are due October 23rd, and this information is on our website. Our web page, which is that line at the top, its.nti.gov, research-topics/RIC-forum. And if you go to the main ITS web page, there's a link to that RIC forum page there.
Thank you. Can you please talk about the selection criteria should you receive an overwhelming number of applications?
Well, I would be really happy if we received an overwhelming number of applications. That would be a very exciting outcome. And that's something Lauriston went over towards the end. We will first go through and systematically rate all of the applications on a 5-level Likert scale. And then we will use the criteria Lauriston listed to obtain a balance of participants. That's in addition to the high application ratings, the use case, diversity of solutions, realism of network and traffic data, and adherence to the Open RAN technology goals. And on our web page, there's a guide listing how we will select go through the applications and select participants if you want more details.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Will companies selected for the RIC Forum have a higher likelihood of getting approved for grants versus companies that are not selected to participate in the RIC Forum?
We are a research and development branch. We have nothing to do with grants. This event will not have any impact on grants.
Next question. Is the RIC Forum audience invite only, or is attendance open to the public?
Attendance is open to the public. We will have remote participation option. Now, realistically, the remote participants can't participate in the showcase since that's going around talking to individual people, but the rest of it will be streamed for remote participations, and we will have open invitation for in-person participation as well.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have 2 technical questions, and if you still have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. So this next one, if we choose the energy saving use case, can we demonstrate that the carriers have been shut down instead of showing the energy consumption statistics, since they may not be readily available from the energy provider?
I think that's a good question and certainly valid. Yes, if you're demonstrating that you are, by example, shutting down the carrier, then it would be nice for you to be able to demonstrate, and that's fine. So you've demonstrated energy savings. The thing that we're looking for there would be, it would be nice to know if you could give a general estimate of what that would be as far as an energy savings, but I understand that those statistics may be available, so you can say, by example, that maybe it's a amount of energy over a period of time, and we've shut down this carrier, so the consumption by that radio is lowered to a certain amount. That would be certainly sufficient in the process.
Thank you. And this last question is a 2-parter. Can the RAN nodes CU, DU, RU be simulated, or do they have to be real? What about the UEs? It looks like this setup does not allow for free space radio propagation.
Okay, I'll go backwards. Yes, we're not set up for free space radio propagation in this process. If you care to bring it, and we will not have STAs or anything in the process of allowing for specific spectrum available for you to be testing. So now, and going backwards, UEs, simulation is fine in the process. Either one is fine. As far as simulated DUs, RUs, CU, DU, and RU. It's a good question, and it's a hard question to answer, in that what we're really trying to assess is the present state of the industry. We're trying to help understand where we are. This is for lack of a better word, part of a research activity on our part for our sponsor. So if everything's simulated, that doesn't do as much as if we're operating on a real network elements. So we would prefer to see something that's operating on real network elements, but you're welcome to file an application that has simulated network elements. As I said, the UE's simulation is certainly acceptable in the process, because what we're really looking at is what's happening with the other network elements. But we would prefer By example, that if you're going to operate on an RU, it'd be really nice if you were actually demonstrating that you were operating on an actual RU. But that's not going to preclude you making an application, and we'll judge accordingly. But if your application is going against other people that are demonstrating physical network operation, they'll probably have a leg up in the process. I hope that's kind of wishy-washy, I'm sorry, but that we have to wait until the time we see all the applications and see how that fits the criteria of what we would say is authentic XApp and RF activities.
Thank you. So also, if you think of questions after the webinar, please feel free to email them to ricforum@ntia.gov. Looks like we have one more question coming in. What is preferred between a simulated deployment with a realistic traffic pattern versus a real deployment with a couple of UEs?
Okay, let me make sure if I read the question correctly, simulated deployment would I would assume mean that the network elements are simulated versus real network elements. I think I touched on that just a minute ago. We're very interested in affecting actual network elements. So here at CUDURU. And as far as the UEs are concerned, UE simulation is just fine. I don't think there's any real issue with that, unless there's a reason that you think that your demonstration with actual UEs brings more clarity to the process. So in any situation, we're going to be very interested in realistic traffic patterns. You know, so as far as whether the traffic data that you're using, however you're inputting to your RFX app in the process, we're interested to know how realistic that traffic pattern is versus a traffic pattern that was generated just to show a certain activity.
Thank you. We have one more question. It's a clarification question. In addition to simulated, emulated implementations, is it permissible to include videos and/or statistics from relevant operational environments, i.e. real world?
Margaret, I'll ask you to weigh in on this too, but I think if I understand the question correctly, we're probably talking about the 30-minute presentation versus the time that you have to do the one-on-one discussions. In the 30-minute presentation, we're expecting to see actual operation, not a video of an operation. Is that correct, Margaret?
I would agree. However, I'd like to clarify that during that presentation, we're expecting you to give background information. So statistics from relevant operational environments would be appropriate, as would explanations, slides, for example, that describe. But the videos, we would like those to wait until you're one-on-one in the showcase. Kristen, you're muted.
Sorry about that. How do you reconcile the performance of different apps when deployments are on different infrastructure with different use cases?
Well, the simple answer is we don't have to. This is a demonstration of these, and so we are. Once you get to the point of being a part of the forum, we're not really judging one against another. We're allowing you to demonstrate however we've accepted your application to demonstrate. As far as judging the applications in the process, I don't know that we have. I don't know at that point that we'll have performance measurements to judge them. That we're going to look at the application to see if it meets the goals of the challenge, so that it's technically sound, and it's demonstrating the use case. And if we're having to measure one against another, then at some point we will have to make our judgments on how is this application being deployed, what are we going to see in the presentation, and how does that measure gets that goal of being authentic and being a demonstration of something that's actually able to operate in a network. And we're comfortable with the fact that we are demonstrating that here is something that's really actually affecting network elements. So that's the best I can say on that until we see the application.
And I'd like to add that we would like to see very different deployments. That would be very interesting to us and to everyone in the audience, I'm sure.
Thank you. And that was the last question. Again, please feel free to email ricforum@ntia.gov if you think of questions after the webinar.
And before we close, I would like to show our website. So this is the RIC Forum webpage on the ITS website. And on this top line on the left, we have a link to the RIC Forum guide. That's a PDF file that explains everything we've said here and provides slightly more details. That includes the submission deadlines, our criteria for selection. The middle link, application form, that's the application form for you to fill out that you will be emailing to ricforum@nti.gov. And on the right, the example completed application. That is an example application with fake data, just to show you the sort of answers that we're interested in. Again, submit your applications to ricforum@nti.gov by 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, October 23rd, 2023. We will announce by November 13th, and the event itself will be March 27th through 28th in 2024. I would also like to note that academic participants can request help with travel costs, and we will take that under consideration. So thank you to everyone for attending, and we will make this a video recording of this webinar available on our website. I see one comment came in by the chat and saying that the DoD is keenly interested in identifying companies and entities with RIC expertise, as well as the current state of the RIC development. So thank you for that. Everyone have a good day or a good evening, and I hope to receive your applications or see you during the RIC Forum.